I am
Likewise.
Dr. Fran White with Community College Search Services, and we welcome and thank you for your interest in Anza College and serving as its next president. The Anza College faculty, classified professionals, and administrative staffs, students, and community members have provided questions for this taping. I will be asking you questions from these groups. You will have 55 minutes for questions and answers and 5 minutes for closing comments. You may ask me to repeat questions as needed.
Great.
Setting the clock, let me begin by asking you question number one. In 5 minutes or less, please begin by telling us your personal story, including some of the influences or circumstances that have made you who you are today.
I want to begin. I want to begin by thanking you for the opportunity to move this far along in the interview. Um, a little of my background. I grew up in Mississippi. I grew up in a single parent home. My father died when I was 9 months old, and it was from an accidental gunshot wound, and so that left my mom at the time with a 9-month-old child and a 26-month-old son. So there were two boys. My mom was not an individual who had worked outside the home. And so at the time, um, we ended up, because my mom would have had to, if she had found a job, she probably would have paid most of the earnings that she could have had with to childcare. And so we went on public assistance. So I grew up on public assistance until the time I was 13 years old. I remember in sixth grade getting my first pair of store-bought jeans. I know what it's like to live in a household where we have eaten peas and cornbread, every day of the week, not having meat at the time. And so, but I grew up in an environment where my mom always said to us that never allow your present situation to determine where you're going to end up in life. And that was something that I continue to live by and continue to stress to students, that whatever your present situation is, it's not the sole determinant of where you're going to end up. And I think that I've been a prime example of that. I graduated, as number 3 in my class of about 150 students in high school. And then I went to a community college that really set me on the path to become who I am today. When I left the community college, I went to the University of Mississippi because there were 10 schools of accountancy at the time in the nation. And I wanted to go to the University of Mississippi and not just enroll in a business program, but enroll in an actual school of accountancy. So I went to the University of Mississippi, really never having knowingly experienced things like racism, or not really noticing the discrimination that may have occurred. But I got to the University of Mississippi and encountered situations where I was told that I didn't belong there, to go home, that I, as an African-American male, could not be successful at the institution. And so, I could have taken that situation and said, okay, I'm going to leave this institution and go to a place where I'm wanted. But I said that I needed to turn that around. And so I turned that situation around and said, how can I use that as a driving force to make me the best person that I can possibly be? So I ended up getting my bachelor's degree, my master's, and my doctorate from the University of Mississippi because of those experiences that I had as a student while there. The other thing that I just want to mention is that when I got my first job, my first full-time job at the University of Mississippi, I got that job because I had volunteered as a student to do some things in our counseling center. And I was given an opportunity for that job at the counseling center. Even though I may not have been the most qualified individual, I was the individual that my supervisor, the lady who would become my supervisor, she saw my potential. And she gave me an opportunity as a result of that. And as a result of her seeing potential in me, it's truly impacted who I am as a person. And it's forced me to really look at the potential in other people. So that's one of the things that I do. It's not all, it's not, in all situations that you have to know everything that there is to know, but you can show your potential, and you have to recognize that potential in others as a leader and pull that out of folks. And so that's been the hallmark of who I am, the hallmark of where I am today. And it's those early in life experiences and the experiences of my early supervisors that's truly shaped who I am as an individual. And it's said to me that the things I've achieved today, part of my responsibility is to give back and see that potential in others, whether it's our students, whether it's our faculty, whether it's our staff. That's my job as a leader.
Thank you for that. Question number 2. As a college leader, how have you fostered a campus environment that is collegial?
When I look at myself over the years, I will tell you that early on in my educational career, in my doctoral education, one of the first classes that I walked into was a human resource development class. And one of the things that I first remember the professor talking about was the importance of studying people and recognizing who it is that's in front of you. And I think that oftentimes we look beyond who we're talking to, and we oftentimes will come into a situation with our own perceptions about people, our own thoughts, and we oftentimes will make our decisions prior to even getting to know the individual or the situation. One of the things that I have been very, I'll say skilled at or good at is really recognizing what people are bringing to the table. And I when I was working in the counseling center, I engaged in this certification for reality therapy, control theory, and quality management. And one of the things that something that happened to me, I had a roommate at the time who just wouldn't. He made the best food in the world, but when he would not clean up the stove after he finished cooking. And that really irritated me. And so my supervisor at the time, because I was going through this reality therapy quality management program certification, and she said, "What are you doing to get what you want?" And I said, "Excuse me?" She says, "Well, let me ask you this. What do you want that you're getting? What do you want that you're not getting? And what are you getting that you don't want? And then what are you doing to get what you want? And then how is what you're doing working? And so now, Lloyd, what's the plan?" And I have been able to use that model to really foster an environment where people are willing to say, here are the things that I need. Here are the things that I want. And then I, as an individual, am then able to have conversations with folks and help people move to where they need to be or where they should be. I think a prime example of how this work has paid off for me was when I won the governance award at North Shore Community College, and it was the award that was given to the individual who had done the most to promote shared governance at the institution that year. And so that was very important. When I came to Monroe, because of the work that I had done with governance at North Shore, Monroe, there were some issues with the governance system. And so I was a part of helping to create a governance system at Monroe Community College. And so, and of course, there was growing pains, and there still are some growing pains. However, I've been able to move into an environment and help shape that environment into what it has become. You know, and I look at my current student services division. People want to feel that you care about them and that you understand the things that they're going through. And so, you know, a part of me creating that environment is letting people know that I genuinely care about them and I care about the environment that they're working in, and that I'm committed to them, that I'm committed to making certain that they're working in an environment where they can be successful, that they can achieve those goals that they want to achieve. So those are some of the things that I would say that I've done in order to promote a collegial environment.
Thank you. Question number 3, given the rapidly changing landscape of higher education and the potential impact of future global crises, what are some ideas that you have about how De Anza would need to change to stay relevant?
Ideas that I would have about how De Anza needs to change in order to stay relevant. One of the things that I will say is that, you know, as a new person coming into De Anza, being separate from De Anza, I think the first thing that I will say is important is that De Anza needs to recognize that I, as the new president, would need to learn what's going on at De Anza even more fully than I do now, because I think it's easy for us to look at what's happening on the on the website or look at YouTube videos about De Anza and say, oh, I would change this, I would change that. But I think it's important, you know, before someone says, oh, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that they truly understand what's going on. So that's the first thing that I would say. But to answer the question more fully, I think that we recognize that what we've seen at De Anza as the norm with this pandemic that's going on right now, we're creating a new normal, and it's a normal that none of us are completely aware of where it may end up. But the things that I do know is that we have to look at our digital footprint, because, you know, the thing of face to face, you know, we're looking at De Anza for the fall semester, and I know that De Anza has said we're going to look at hybrid courses. We're going to look at courses being offered remotely. So we really have to begin to think about how we as an institution are stepping into that digital footprint. I think that we also have to begin to think about how we're going to engage not only our faculty and staff, but how we're going to engage our students. You know, we think about the fact that it's much easier to engage with our students face to face when they're on campus. But we can't necessarily do that now. But if we can't get students connected to the campus, get them engaged with the campus, the chances of them being successful, or the chances of us retaining those students, it's going to be much more slimmer than it would be than if we had students on campus. So we're going to have to look at that. I think that we're going to have to look at how we engage with our local businesses, because as we look at a changing economy, we've got to look at that and really work with our businesses possibly in a different way. Right now, I certainly don't know fully how De Anza engages with our local businesses. But when I think about things about career and technical ed, we have got to understand what our local businesses are looking for and make certain that we're able to provide, you know, a workforce, you know, for some of these companies, you know, at a more accelerated pace. And so we've got to look at offering short-term certificates, and I think that those are the things that are important for De Anza as we move into this new space. We're going to have to look at how we engage with our donors. You know, I continually hear about how we address food and housing insecurity among our students. We've got to look at how we partner with the foundation, how we partner with private entities within the community to address some of those needs. So that's the long of an answer that probably could have been short.
It's okay, because it's a good lead in to the next question.
Okay.
Question number 4. In light of student needs, such as housing, transportation, food, and health services, how do you plan to combat enrollment decline and maintain student enrollment and retention rates?
Okay. You know, I think that you know, we hear all the time that when we have an economy where there's high unemployment rate, the enrollment numbers of an institution goes up, of a community college. I will tell you that a problem that we have with this pandemic, it's something that we haven't seen before. And there's a major concern among students and their families about affordability. Can we afford to pay for college at this point? You know, or do we really need to be out looking for work? I think that as a college, you know, when I look at the fact that De Anza participated in a food and housing insecurity survey, where they said that 62% of the students at De Anza face some food or housing insecurity. One of the things that I found in my current institution was that oftentimes students don't leave our institutions because they can't be successful in the classroom. They're leaving our institutions because they have these struggles in their personal lives, whether it's childcare, whether it's housing, whether it's food, you know, whether it's a flat tire, where they couldn't afford to get their car fixed and get to the campus. These are issues that we as an institution have to be able to address. You look at the cost of living in the Silicon Valley. You know, I will tell you that you know, when I became a finalist and I started looking for housing in the area, you know, because I said, okay, if I'm selected, what are housing costs going to be like? And I started looking at the cost of housing in the area where De Anza students come from. The housing costs are astronomical, and students can't afford that. And so I think that as an institution, we have to begin to think more fully about developing these well-rounded programs that are going to allow us to address those needs. Because if students are concerned about food, clothing, and shelter, they are not going to be as successful in the classroom. You know, we hear all the time, a hungry student can't learn. So then our responsibility as an institution needs to be, how can we ensure that the student who's coming to our campus is in a position where they can learn? How can we as an institution take down some of those barriers? And one of the things that's happened for me at Monroe Community College is that I was able to work with my team so that we could develop a comprehensive set of programs and services to address these resource needs, which ultimately led to our institution receiving a $3 million grant from the Wegmans Foundation, where they just wrote us a check to say, here's this money, let's figure out what we can do to address food and housing insecurity so that we have an impact on retention. It's all about retaining these students. And it's much easier to retain a student, or it's much less costly to retain a student than it is to go out and recruit. And when we look at an economy where most institutions are struggling with enrollment, most institutions are, that we've got to figure out how we can retain those students that we have, and as an institution, have a competitive edge over other institutions that are out there. That's what I have to bring as the president of De Anza College. How do I help put us in a position where we're able to better retain the students that we have? And so, it's something that I would have to work with not just the vice presidents on, but this is something that we can bring in folks from the ground up, from from the secretaries who are working at the institution, to help us create programs that are going to ensure the success of these students.
Okay, moving right along. We're at question number 5. How would you work to diversify the full-time, tenured, and part-time faculty to reflect the student demographics we serve?
That's a wonderful question. And I think that, I find that over the years, I have found that to be a very interesting question, because I think many institutions are looking at issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that as an institution, we have to look at, number one, what are the requirements that we are putting in place that sometimes, that oftentimes unintentionally disadvantage individuals who may not represent our student demographics, or who may represent our student demographics. So oftentimes, even from the point of writing job descriptions, we limit some folks. My current institution, and I'm guilty of this. I have an associate VP position. And one of the things that when I was thinking about that, I said, oh, I think I want somebody who has a doctorate. And I began to think, why? Why do I need someone with a doctorate to serve as my associate vice president? By making that requirement, I'm cutting people out of the application pool. And so I had to really begin to look at myself and say, what is it that I'm doing that's preventing us from getting to where we need to be? I think that we need to be very clear about what our institutional goals are. And then we have to intentionally work toward achieving those goals. The other thing that I would say is critical as we begin to look at diversifying our employee base, it's not just enough to diversify the applicant base, or it's not just enough to diversify our staff. We have to look at creating an environment where individuals who represent our students more, that when they do come to the institution, that they feel welcome, that they feel included. So it's not just enough to talk about diversity. We as an institution have to move to inclusion. It's one thing to invite people to the table, but when you invite those folks to the table, do you allow them to eat? And do you allow them to have a real voice at the table? That's what we have to move to as an institution. So it's not just about diversifying students. And I will say again, it's important that individuals have people on the campus who look like them. I'm a prime example of coming up through an educational system where I had very few people that looked like me. Very few people. I had very few people coming up through the years. I tell people all the time that at this point, when I go out as an individual, I'm very clear about the fact that I'm an African American male, and that I don't try to hide that. I'm very, very proud of it. But I also talk to folks about the fact that, I have a husband who happens to be white. And I'm very transparent about that because, when I was coming up, I didn't have somebody, in education that was willing to do that and represent and be a voice for that student out there who may be the student or staff member who may be experiencing the issues that I had with that. So it's critical to me that number one, as the president, that I'm very transparent and represent who I am and represent what I stand for. But it's also important to me that people feel included when we do bring them to the table. We think about the number of people who come to an institution and then leave because they didn't feel truly welcome there. That's not what we're about. That's not what I don't think that's what De Anza is about. It's about welcoming folks and making them feel a part of the community.
Thank you for that. We're just about halfway through the interview taping, and we're now at question number 6. This is a multi-part question about 3 parts.
Okay.
Please tell us about your experience in fundraising and working with donors. What specific gifts have you personally secured? Can you tell us of an example where you had a challenging relationship with a donor and how you handled it?
I apologize. I was writing down the question.
Good.
Okay. So my experience in fundraising, I will tell you that prior to my coming to Monroe, I had very little experience in that area. Once I got to Monroe, I truly had it was an amazing experience because the partnership that I had with our foundation, it's just been exceptional. And so one of the things that I will say that I have done when it comes to fundraising is that the system at Monroe is that our whoever is interested in securing funds, they never go out to do that without our director of development. And that's just the model that we have had, or that I've lived under the past 6 years. So a number of things that I can speak to. We had an individual who had been a gift giver to Monroe for quite a number of years and had made some significant gifts to the college. The first gift began with an $85,000 Steinway piano. It then moved to a $1.5 million gift. It then moved to another $1 million gift, and it culminated a couple of years ago with a $4 million gift to fund scholarships for the institution. We always have a gala, and our foundation is very strategic in who they sit with individuals. We recognized that we had a need to raise money for our food and housing insecurity. And we knew that this individual who had given $4 million, he had a lot of connections. So what we did, I was stationed next to this individual at the table who had given this $4 million gift. And based upon my conversations with this individual, at the end of the meeting, this individual is the one who reached out to the Wegmans Foundation and we got a check for $3 million. And it was because of my engagement with that donor and because of the stories that I was able to go through that I was able to secure that to secure that money. I will tell you that it's, you know, I have had some challenging relationships, in that oftentimes if you're not familiar with what it is that's important to a donor, oftentimes when you're headed down one direction trying to get dollars and you haven't figured out really what's important to them, you don't get them. And so I think that it's been important that I really look at, you know, prior to meeting with the donor, really learn all that you possibly can about that donor, because yeah, I've made some mistakes in not working closely with our foundation enough to understand what's important to the donor and what would they be willing to give. There are some donors you can go out with the data and give all this data, but if you don't appeal to their hearts as well as their minds, then you don't get them to engage. I've made those mistakes along with our foundation. But those have all been learning experiences that you know, if I were selected as the president, I truly recognize that you got to learn who your donors are and learn what they are willing to contribute to. You got to look at their past givings and see what they've given to in the past, so that you can understand what's important to them. Those are the things that are important. And so I've had the experience. I have secured gifts, and I have indeed had challenges and by, you know, been mistaken in not understanding who the donor or who the donor base is.
Okay, question number 7. Partnerships are important. Tell us about the most significant partnership that you developed in your career. How would you nurture De Anza College's existing partnerships? And what is your strategy for securing new ones?
You know, I've developed some really good partnerships over the years, and as I think about my most significant, they all relate to student success, student engagement, and I would say that because that's who I am and that's what I'm about. And I think about the partnerships, and it's really difficult for me to come up with a single one as I talk about this. I'm very proud of what I've done in order to advance what my institution is doing to address food and housing insecurity. I'm very proud of that, and I look at the partnership that I created between Monroe and our regional food bank, and such that I was asked to be on the board of the regional food bank, because I know that it's such a significant issue for our students. And as a result of my work there, you know, I've created partnerships with other institutions, you know, where you know, I became a part of the State University of New York System's Food Insecurity Task Force, where we looked at trying to, at the 64 institutions that are a part of the SUNY system, and said, how do we address those issues? I think that so that's probably the most significant thing that I've done, and I wish I honestly could talk about the partnerships that have been created through that probably the rest of my time, but I'm trying to watch the clock as I'm giving my answers. And so I think that as I move forward, I think it's important for me to really, if I were selected to come to De Anza, I want to know what partnerships De Anza currently has in place. And I want to know, what are the strengths of those partnerships, and where would we be able to build better partnerships with the individuals that we're already partnering with. In addition to that, I think that we've got to look at where are the potential partnerships that we haven't developed, and how can I, along with the members of De Anza, really work to create even more partnerships than we already have. I think that we oftentimes forget that every single one of us who are part of the institution can be an ambassador for the institution. Every single one of us can go out and create opportunities to partner with other agencies or partner with other companies. And a part of my job as the president is to encourage other individuals to see themselves in that role, and to work with me as the president to go out there and be supportive of that, and try to build the relationships. It's not that we're necessarily asking individuals to go out and do it, but you have these connections. If a new president coming in from New York to the Silicon Valley, I don't know everything there is to know about out there, but I have to be willing to say, as the president, give me your ideas. I'm willing to go out there. I'm willing to build these partnerships so that De Anza can move forward in the future. This is a new day for how we do things as an educational institution. We have to do things differently, and we have to engage with our partners differently. I mentioned earlier about the work that we do in CTE. We've got to be a different institution than we have been, and I've got to work with the folks of De Anza to help move us to that different spot. That's important. We all can build partnerships. And ultimately, while I realize it's going to be my responsibility, ultimately, we all have a role to play in that.
Okay, that's taking us to question number 8. How would you work toward closing or eliminating equity gaps, particularly for Latinx, African American, and LGBTQ plus students? Who would you bring to the table, and why?
How would I close the equity gap? Who would I bring to the table, and why? I've said this previously in interviews. We as an institution, one, have to understand that everyone doesn't begin at the same starting line. And as an institution, it's important that we recognize that when individuals come to our doors, we as an institution have to attempt to be ready for that student. That student, in the traditional ways that we look at education, they may not be ready for us. They may not be as skilled when it comes to certain things, and it can impact their future. But we as an institution, I think, have to understand that we can't just build blocks to create equity for folks. We have to be willing to take down that fence that stands between individuals and their success. We have to think about what are the barriers that we as individuals are creating that's not allowing us to have equitable outcomes. I think that it's important that oftentimes we forget that as we're creating these solutions, we're not having the conversations with those individuals that didn't necessarily start off at the same spot. You know, when I was while I was at Monroe a few years ago, I created this campaign that said we will whatever, and you know we will transfer, we will graduate, we will be successful, we will do this. And that campaign was for African American males, because they saw that African American males, their 3-year graduation rate was 9% versus white males whose was at 25.6%. And so I created this campaign because they said, our African American males need to see themselves on campus. So I sat down with this group of students and I said, we have a problem here and I need your help in finding a solution. And one of the things that the students said to me that really stuck with me was that, and of course I'm an African American male and I was sitting with African American males, and they said, here's a problem that we have. You're an African American male, but we don't see you as one of us. And I said, really? I said, no, we don't see you as one of us. So the problem is we walk around here with our book bags on, our jeans, our ripped up jeans, our sagging pants, our whatever. You walk around the campus every single day in a suit and tie. And we as students feel like you have arrived. We don't think that you've had the same experiences that we have. The experiences that we have is that when we come to class, we're seen as either a number, or our professors don't recognize that when we go home, we don't have the technology to do the work that requires us, that we're required to have in order to do that. So, and that really sort of took me aback. And so from that moment on, I said, we've got to figure out who the right people are to bring to the table. And if it's our students, we've got to include them in the conversation. We've got to include faculty and staff at all levels of the institution, because students need to feel like they fit in and that they can achieve, that they can be successful. And a part of what I have to do as an African American male president who happens to be a part of the LGBT community, I have to be willing to stand up, tell my story, be transparent about who I am, so that I can then get people to see a piece of themselves in me, and then encourage them to be all that they can be. That's important. That's important.
Thank you so much for that. We're at the last question number 9. And it's a 3-part question again.
Okay.
As the president of an equity-focused institution that values the participation of all its constituents, please share your vision of how shared governance at De Anza College can flourish. What measures do you believe are essential to ensuring that decision-making processes are inclusive, transparent, collaborative, and engaging for all members of the campus community, including students?
I think that when it comes to shared governance, one of the things that I want to be very clear with the folks of De Anza is that as a president, And if you look at, look throughout my career, I've never believed in a dictatorship. President is not a dictator. Um, and I think that a thing that's important to me when it comes to shared governance, if people don't feel that they are a part of the institution, that their voice is going to be heard, that their voice is appreciated, then they don't necessarily enjoy their time at the institution as much as they could or should. They don't. They aren't willing to make difficult, make sacrifices for the institution. I think that when I look at shared governance and shared governance, I want an institution where every single person at the institution feels that they are important. I think that when I look at the various shared governance bodies that exist at De Anza, I think that they have to be represented at the table when the table exists. There are times, I recognize that everybody can't be at the table all the time. I recognize that. But one of the things that I look for is when decisions are being made, what is the input that we have gotten from the constituency? And are we making this decision without the input of our students? Have we informed our students of what's going on? When I came to Monroe, I was very disappointed in the fact that I was told that we couldn't even have students on search committees. And I said, what do you mean? We can't have students on search committees. I said, that's not going to be how my division operates. Yes, I'm going to have students on search committees because their voice needs to be heard. I also, when I got to Monroe, even though we had a classified staff organization, I didn't feel that our classified staff, their voices were being heard. So I then began to hold luncheons in my own division that I paid for out of my own pocket, where I was inviting like 20 people, 20 of our classified staff to lunch with me twice a semester, just so that I could hear their voices. That is important. And I would say that as a president, I think that if I'm not inclusive, if I'm not transparent, then I will not be a successful president at De Anza. That's not what I've seen. As I'm looking at, when I went to the shared governance website, and I was like, oh, what an amazing structure. And so as I was going through my day-long interview yesterday, some of the questions that came up, it's very clear to me that shared governance is strong at De Anza, and it has to be advanced. We cannot in these changing times, COVID-19 has put us in a place that we have never been before. And if I don't, as the president, include individuals, we're not going to be successful. And we're not going to be an even more excellent institution than De Anza already is. It's an exceptional institution. We can always be better, but it takes the full team to make that happen. And I will commit, body and soul to that people will be included in the process. People will hear from me, that I'm open to hearing the ideas of others. All of that's important as we move forward as a De Anza. I've said before, De Anza isn't the buildings, it's the people. And if you don't include the people in the decision making, and if you're not transparent with them, De Anza isn't De Anza.
All right. So doing a quick check, Dr. Holmes, on how many minutes we have remaining. We have 11 minutes remaining. And in those remaining minutes, please use the time to circle back to any questions you'd like to expand on or to share any final thoughts with us.
You know, I think that a few things that I would say, and I want to really go back to the very first question, the very first question, and about the things that really have allowed me to get to this point, the point where I am today. Because I think that while it's important to you know, to address quite a few issues. You know, people want to know, what are your priorities as a president, and where do you see us in 3 years, 5 years, however many years. You know, all of that certainly is important. But I think that the thing that I would say people are looking for is that, you know, I stop and I think about the fact that De Anza has had a president that was there for, if I'm not mistaken, 14 years. And people, you know, typically when you have an individual that's been there that long, people absolutely love, you know, a president that lasts that long. You know, even in some of the conversations that I was in yesterday, even with the interim president right now, I know that people absolutely love the interim president, and so people are oftentimes concerned about who's coming in and how are they going to change the culture of the institution, based upon on their likes, their dislikes, those sorts of things. The thing that I will say to the folks of De Anza, as we move toward making the decision of who they want to be their next president, it's important to know that I'm an individual who's I'm very open. I'm very transparent, because I think it's really difficult when you're dealing with one person today and then tomorrow it's somebody completely different. And that's not what De Anza is looking for. That's not what De Anza needs. I think about, and I continually go back to my artwork, because my art says a lot about who I am. And when when I left the University of Mississippi, you know, I was given this piece of art from one of the professors, and he actually gave me 3 pieces, and I'll talk about a couple of them. He gave me this one piece that, and it was written on it. It says, "Not superfluous, not deficient." At the top of that art, there was this circle, and it had these lines inside the circle that were all together, and it was all inside the circle. At the bottom, there's this shape that looks like it's a distorted heart, and the heart, there's this line that's broken this heart in two. And he says, "I want to give this to you because it truly defines who you are." He says, "I give this to you to tell you that you're not superfluous and you're not deficient." He says, "You are not an individual." He says, "You think about the at the top, you got the circle, and everything inside the circle is together." He says, "Oftentimes we have individuals who thinks the world revolves around them, that they are better than others, Conversely, we have these individuals who, at the bottom, their heart is broken, it's split in two, and they think that they're less than. He says, you're one of these individuals who doesn't think you're better than anyone else, but you don't think that you're less than. And one of the things that I, as the new president of De Anza, I certainly would say that's the message that I want people to know about me, that I'm an individual that you're going to see out on campus. I'm going to be one of these individuals that, when people are carrying boxes on campus, I'm one of these people, I'll carry a box. I'm no better than anybody else. I say to folks, when you're out there digging a ditch, I'm going to be that person that's digging a ditch with you. And I think that that's what De Anza needs. De Anza needs someone who's going to be a part of them, who's not moving into this position because they are so concerned about the title, but they're concerned about how can I engage with students, faculty, and staff to create an even better De Anza. And by creating, how do we go about creating a better De Anza? We go about that by engaging with our people and creating opportunities for them to thrive and for them to be successful. That's what I would bring if I'm the successful candidate. The other piece of art, and I think I may be coming up on my time, I'm not sure, but the other piece of art that I have in my office, which is, and I look at this every day, it's a piece of art where there are birds in this thing, and it's all kind of abstract, but then there are these lines and these dots, and the card that the faculty member gave to me when he did that said, "So profound has been your influence, it's as if you're still here." And he says, you have been to the University of Mississippi, one of these individuals that came in, and the impact that you made, it will forever be present at this institution. And he says, you walked into a space and said, I'm going to leave this space better than I found it. The commitment that I will make to De Anza, that I will make to the faculty, the staff, students, the local community, the state of California, is that when I come to De Anza, my ultimate goal is not about recognition for me, because that's not what I'm about. I'm not about personal recognition. What I'm about is making the space that I enter better than I found it. And that's what you'll get with me if I'm your new president.